Thank you so very much. I have to give a small disclosure is I'm working in front of three screens in a new office right now from our new inpatient residence in Waterford, Michigan. And so I'm sure you can all imagine having to do a presentation with trying to figure out three screens. So I got it figured out and we are ready to go. I'd just like to echo what Jen had said and really appreciate you being here and showing interest in this topic. Generally, when I find people come to conversations and presentations like this, it's generally because they have somebody or someone in their life that they're caring for, and that hopefully this information will be helpful. Hopefully, we'll be able to have some good discussion. And my hope is that you'll also walk away with something new that will help you on your journey of being a caregiver. Just a little bit about myself. I am a licensed clinical social worker, but I also have a lot of training in dementia education. I've been certified in several different modalities of memory care, as well as holding the Certified Montessori Dementia Care Practitioner credential. I've spent a large chunk of my career working in memory care in residential settings, so assisted living, nursing homes, independent living. And the one thing that I have found in that work is it's incredibly challenging. There's a lot of physical and emotional challenges, but there's also a lot of joy to be had. And sometimes that's very difficult to find that. So I hope today we can also leave understanding kind of what our role is and how we can help bring joy to the situation that we are working with. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. Does everybody see the screen? Just doing a check.
Yes.
Okay,
Are
good.
all set, Jamie.
Good. So I'm going to move or try to move to the next screen. There we go. So understanding dementia. A lot of folks that I've worked with have shared my loved one has dementia, and dementia isn't actually a disease process within itself. It's an umbrella term for a set of symptoms that affect people's memory, cognition, and social abilities, really on a level that is severe enough to impact their daily ability to function. And so it's not necessarily the dementia as the disease process, it's something that's caused by other diseases. And today I'm just going to share the few main ones that you have heard about. And the biggest one that we talk about in dementia care is Alzheimer's disease. And Alzheimer's disease is one of the most common types of diseases that cause the symptoms of dementia. We also have vascular disease. And vascular disease really is something that is caused by damage to different parts of the brain that can be brought on by things like heart attacks or strokes, can be compounded by diabetes. It's something that generally will affect your vascular system that damages the ability for oxygen to get to your brain. Parkinson's disease is another disease that brings about symptoms of dementia. There's also Lewy body dementia and frontotemporal dementia. So these five disease processes are the diseases that will bring about signs of dementia. And a lot of people ask me, why is it important to know what disease process that I have? And I always share it's a personal decision whether or not you want to be able to go through what it takes to get diagnosed. And usually that means going to a primary care physician or going to a neurologist and going through different types of tests. There's no actual way to determine or diagnose specifically what type of disease causes the dementia unless a brain autopsy is done. But what clinicians and physicians generally do is they do an assessment where they are looking for different signs and symptoms of presentation of these diseases. to be able to pick out what disease process they feel might be happening. And based on that, a better, more individualized plan of care can be developed. So I'll give you a couple examples. So Alzheimer's disease generally affects the whole brain and it starts out a little mild, forgetting, maybe some repetitiveness, and generally it has a very slow and steady decline, and that happens usually over the course of about 7 to 10 years. And so you see some pretty traditional presentations of that disease over time. Whereas vascular disease is a little bit different because you may have not had a lot of signs and symptoms of dementia. And maybe somebody, say, has heart disease or, diabetes, high blood pressure, and has those combinations. And it results in somebody, say, having a heart attack or a stroke. Generally, what that means is the brain has been without oxygen for a certain part of time, and depending on what part of the brain is affected, will have the presentation of what the disease looks like. So, for example, I've worked with people before who have had a stroke and it's affected their ability to speak. And those are the types of plan of care that we want to work and say, okay, well, what can we do for this person to be able to prevent maybe further events? Because vascular disease generally has a step-like project or decline. So somebody will have a normal functioning, they'll have some type of an event, a heart attack or stroke, and maybe their baseline goes down a little bit, and then they'll, have some not have any challenges for a while, and then maybe another event will happen, or maybe a small series of strokes will happen that will cause that further decline. So it's kind of referred to as a step-like decline. Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's disease is a disease process that really affects your movement. But also what has been discovered is that there are challenges with with having some dementia associated with Parkinson's disease. And usually presentation can be hallucinations or altered different thought processes, very similar to Lewy body dementia. So Lewy body dementia is caused by different, there's these things called plaques and tangles in the brain that is caused by different proteins, and it can cause clumps at different parts of the brain. So with Lewy body dementia, you may see that somebody is doing really well one day and maybe doing really poorly the next. And so it kind of has this up and down fluctuation, which can be really difficult for people because it almost seems like, well, that was weird. Yesterday was totally off, and now today seems back to normal. And then you could go the next day and say, things are totally off again. So it can be really difficult. Like Parkinson's disease, Lewy body, also a hallmark of that disease is having hallucinations. And it's interesting that a lot of the hallucinations that are reported within that type of disease are of animals and small children. Frontotemporal dementia generally affects a younger population, and it can a lot of times be mistaken for mental illness, late onset, because generally people could be in their late 40s or 50s, and the way that it presents itself in frontotemporal dementia is your filter is gone, or maybe you start saying inappropriate things or having, significant mood changes or different types of behaviors that aren't normal to what you've worked with. The folks that I've worked with that have had frontotemporal dementia was a little more challenging because this individual had young children. And so it was not really picked up on because a lot of people don't think dementia affects the younger population. So quite often it can go misdiagnosed for quite some time. So that's just a small snippet of education to letting you know that there are different types of disease processes that can cause those symptoms of dementia. I always like to also talk about who is our person. And I want you to just take a moment and think about being the person in your life or people that you've worked with, or maybe somebody you've heard about. What is the typical person who's living with the signs and symptoms of dementia? Who are they? And traditionally, what we're seeing right now is if you've heard of the boomers or the silver tsunami, We've been assured that they're all coming, those baby boomers. Their birth year is between 1946 and 1964. So those people right now are currently between the ages of 56 and 75, which means they're not coming, they are here. And we really have to figure out how, as a society, are we going to be able to support this growing number of people between this age range who are going to experience or be married to or have children or have friends likely that are going to be living with some form of dementia. These folks that we're talking about, they're living longer. The advances in modern medical science really provides for people living longer, but that doesn't always mean that we're living healthier. People in this population are seeking care from multiple sources, healthcare systems, hospitals, residential settings. I put HCBS here, and what that stands for is home and community-based services. So people who are still living in their home, but maybe need to rely on private duty caregiving or a visiting physician, or maybe meal delivery or pharmacy delivery. Think about all of the things that you need in a day to be able to live your life successfully. The people who are caring for people with dementia or living with dementia themselves are really trying to figure out how to get all of their needs met. And they're trying to figure out how to do that through all of these different resources. As you can imagine, that causes a lot of stress trying to compete for resources because a lot of times resources cost a lot of money too. So we're going to talk a little bit about how there can be a disparity between what you're able to obtain and how your quality of life is impacted by your ability to get help from these resources when you need them. Like I mentioned, being able to get these resources is dependent largely on your ability to pay and also the availability of services. We've seen since COVID that healthcare has really been challenged in having to find nurses, private duty companions, certified nursing assistants, those people that are there to help you and help you either age in your home or work in the residential settings where people need support. It's a difficult job force out there, and those scarcity of people to be able to help, coupled with challenges, and there's all the talk about cutting to Social Security or Medicare. Economics has been really difficult with inflation of prices. All of these combined really impact our caregivers and our people living with dementia. There's an increase in older adults compared to the year 2000. I found that this was a very staggering and sobering fact. The number of adults aged 85 and over has almost doubled. That is a very big number. And that just means that there are so many more people that are looking for these services. And we are supposed to, the projection of people in this age range is supposed to be continue to go up until it blooms in approximately, I think it's the year 2050. So we still have a good 25 years of a population that is going to need supports, either through caregivers or our systems. And dementia complicates typical caregiving. So if you are just a caregiver and you're helping somebody, that comes with its own set of challenges. But dementia really specifically impacts the ability to give care because it impacts somebody's cognition. And when you think about your ability to function, your ability to process and think and drive all of your functions is driven by your brain. And when you have a disease that affects the ability to use your brain as it's intended, it can really complicate your entire picture. And what we really want for our people who are living with dementia is to have a quality of life, to still be able to have joy and enjoy their lives, and their caregivers to have the support they need to also succeed in caregiving relationships. But does not come without its challenges. So we took a look at who is the person that we're caring for, but who is our caregiver? What does a caregiver look like? We hear so much about caregivers. And so I thought that these were some pretty staggering uh, facts. And these come from the 2023 Alzheimer's Disease Facts and Figures Report for 2023. I recommend everybody go to alz.org for any type of support. They have a 24-hour helpline, and you don't necessarily have to be working with somebody or living yourself with Alzheimer's disease. They really support and care for all types of people with all different types of dementia. Um, this number is certainly a little bit more inflated. This was from about a year and a half ago, but more than 11 million Americans are caregivers right now for someone living with Alzheimer's disease or related dementias. So as you start researching and looking more into support, you'll see that acronym ADRD. And again, it stands for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And that really talks about the group of people because although it is important and helpful to know what disease process is causing your dementia, in a lot of cases, the support is going to be the same in the fact that it's supportive care that's going to be able to help you because all of the disease, shouldn't say all, the majority, 99% of those disease processes are degenerative and there is no cure. So there is going to be help that will be needed from the onset of the signs and symptoms through death. So our caregiver. 41% of our caregivers have a household income less than 50%. So when I talk about a lot of times being able to secure resources that are going to help the caregiver and the person living with dementia, a lot of them cost money. And so if we're looking at almost half of our caregivers who have a lower income, they're going to be needing to rely on other types of supports to be able to help the person be able to live a high quality of life and then get the supports for the caregiver. 30% are age 65 and older. So I'm not sure how many of you on the call have ever had to physically help somebody who is living with dementia, but there is a big physical component of helping somebody throughout the progression of the disease. There could be, you think about having to have supervision, but then sometimes we don't always think about those heavier tasks, helping somebody get dressed, maybe helping somebody go to the bathroom, take a shower. If somebody falls, having to help and pick them up off the floor, or if further on in the disease, bed mobility, being able to move around in bed or get from a chair to another chair, standing and walking. It's a very physical component to caregiving. And a lot of our caregivers are couples. 60% are in a long-term relationship or a marriage. And so, as you can imagine, and my experience has been with the generation that I've worked with, it doesn't matter how old you are, you have committed yourself to somebody and you're going to help them as much as you can. But without the right supports and education and knowledge, that caregiver does put themselves at a physical risk. And then you have two people who are needing care. 2/3 are women. So we see a lot of women in the caregiving roles taking over with in-laws, parents. We see a lot of daughters. And 1/4 is what's referred to as the sandwich generation of caregivers. And what this is referring to is people who are not only caring for aging parents or aging family members or neighbors, they're also caring for children of their own. So they're kind of sandwiched in the middle of caregiving for two different populations of people. So this is a 2022 statistic. There is an estimated 18 billion hours of informal. So when I say informal, I really mean unpaid assistance. The amount of care that is given for free is valued at $339.5 billion, which is enough money to fuel a few small countries. So when you think about all of our caregivers and who is this caregiver, who are doing it because we fall into caregiving relationships for many different reasons. We do it because maybe we've committed ourselves in a relationship or because they're a family member. Sometimes we fall into caregiving relationships by accident. I've worked with a lot of people who have grown close to maybe a neighbor who's older, and then maybe that neighbor doesn't have anybody. And so over time, as things change, people have a responsibility or feel a pull to still care for people that they've grown close to. So there's just many different reasons why people fall into caregiving relationships. There's a lot of unintended consequences from caregiving. Caregiving is a gift, but we have to be real and talk about that it does also have some costs associated with it. One of those is monetary. When you think about the 2/3 of caregivers who are women, a lot of those women who are caregivers have to take time off of work, which can result in personal money loss that maybe they're contributing to their family. So let's say you're living in that sandwich generation as a woman. You're caring for aging parents, you have to care for them and your children, but you may have to take days off of work. So you lose money on a paycheck, which then affects your ability to care for children or to maybe purchase groceries or medication. So not only are you giving care that is valued, but you're also losing those monies. We talked a little bit about health. We talked about the physical ability, but emotionally caring for somebody who is living with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia. There's a lot of emotional costs associated with that. Now, again, I've seen so much joy and so much love in coming from the caregiving relationship, but I think if we're not honest about the things that are challenging, we can't support people in the right way. And we have to be able to talk about what is challenging so we know what we need to do as a society to put systems and supports in place to make that caregiving relationship beneficial, not only for the person who needs the care, but for the people who are caring. And then there's economic unintended consequences. Again, if people are not able to work because they're caregiving, that all has ripple effects. So there are most certainly a lot of reasons why, as a society and as a country, we really need to pay attention to what's going on with the increasing numbers of people who are living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias and their caregivers. If we don't, we're going to have a lot of unnecessary cost as a society, but also a lot of unnecessary pain and suffering for people. We also really need to pay attention to the social and racial disparities that come with this. So as I mentioned, if let's say you're living in a household income less than $50,000, that's going to have an effect. And we know that there are greater amounts of people in lower socioeconomic statuses that may not have access to certain services of perhaps maybe people who are in higher socioeconomic statuses. People who are making under $50,000 a year aren't going to have the same access that maybe somebody who's making, 100,000 or more. And so we really have to pay attention to those disparities so that we can make sure that everybody has equity in accessing services in the quest for a higher quality of life. So we've talked about dementia. We've talked about what causes it, who is the person we're caring for, and who is our caregiver. Now I really want to shift a little bit and talk about the actual challenges that caregivers face and talking about how do we manage them. I mentioned cognition is the driver of all function, and it impacts so many different things. Eating and drinking. So just think for a minute, how many of you have, and you don't have to answer, but how many of you have maybe taken a drink of water today or eaten a sandwich or had to figure out how you were going to get food? That all took your brain processing and sequencing. I know right now I'm sitting here with a cup of water and I can recognize that I am getting dry because I'm talking so much, and I can think while I'm talking that there's a cup of water sitting right next to me that I'm going to grab, and I'm going to think about when I'm going to pause so I can take a drink of water. Seems like a very easy, simple thing, right? But being able to process all of that can be very difficult. And when you are living with a disease process that impacts your ability to do those and to think through those steps, or even recognize why you're thirsty, and not know what to do about it, is what caregivers really have to worry about because they have to plan on how to help people make these things happen. And that can be early on and all the way because all of the disease, most of the diseases are degenerative in nature. What means is it's going to get worse over time. And so we have to be prepared when somebody isn't even able to say pick up a cup or maybe even swallow regular food or drinks. How are we going to still support that person? Activities of daily living. Again, the ability to take a shower in the morning and get dressed, brush your teeth. Think about your routine and how many steps you actually go through in the morning. Sometimes, a lot of times, just on autopilot because you're used to doing it. I know that I have a very similar routine every morning, and I'm able to get up, I take my shower, I think about my day, I plan what I'm going to do, all while I'm getting dressed and brushing my teeth. But again, if your ability to think through that is impacted, you're not going to be able to complete those activities of daily living without support. Then there's the instrumental activities of daily living, or sometimes referred to as IADLs. And these are higher level uh, projects or things that you need to do to be able to be successful in life, managing a checkbook, knowing when to pay your bills, planning a calendar, knowing when to plan for doctor's appointments, a lot of those higher level items. Socialization. Humans are social creatures. The ability to be able to sit in a circle and keep up with conversation. Think about how many things you hear all day long that you're constantly processing. I had a conversation with Jen, who welcomed you all to the group this morning, and our conversation lasted for about 15 minutes. And I had to keep thinking of responses and then keep on track of what I actually called her for and have that conversation. And meant that my brain had to function. My thought process had to drive all of the things that I needed to accomplish with her. And that was for work, but sometimes we do those things in socialization, having to say the right thing or make the right response. It all takes your brain thinking on how to do that. Being able to communicate. So when I was talking about being able to notice that I was thirsty and pick up a drink of water, if there are a lot of times where you're, especially with, I mentioned the person that I worked with who had vascular dementia because of a stroke and lost the ability to communicate. That person couldn't always let us know what they needed. And we find this very often when we are working with people with dementia who maybe get a little agitated or a little antsy. A lot of times they can't communicate that they have to go to the bathroom because they don't recognize that physical sensation. Think about when you have to use the bathroom. For some people, there can be a sense of urgency there. And if you couldn't put together what that physical sensation was to be able to not only take yourself to the bathroom, but to tell somebody that you needed assistance to go to the bathroom, I would imagine that I would probably get antsy too. I would have a very real reaction to a very serious situation. The ability to really control emotions. Um, this happens a lot also with multiple all different types of dementia, but being able to really understand maybe how you feel about things, or think about maybe you're sad and you can't remember why you're sad, and that can be even more confusing. Um, I'll talk about that when we go through a few more of the slides. Just checking time here. Your behavior, we talked about that. and your ability to sleep. And this is one thing that I have found that caregivers have really struggled with when they're caring for somebody they love with, because if you don't get sleep as a caregiver, it's very difficult to be a good caregiver. And a lot of times your circadian rhythm, the thing that helps you be able to sleep, can be thrown off by having symptoms of dementia. And relationships. And this has happened an awful lot with parents and children and then in partners, is when you're in the caregiver relationship, there is a loss there. There can be a loss of intimacy, a loss of communication, a loss of connection because your relationship changes. So how do we help caregivers who are having relationships with people that they love still maintain those? Because a lot of times it's those relationships and those feelings that you have for that person that that spurs you and motivates you and inspires you to keep on being a caregiver. So we're going to talk about supportive ways to respond to somebody living with dementia. So let's say you have a symptom of forgetfulness. You're constantly repeating oneself, or you're asking repetitive questions. I've worked with multiple people over the years where, oh gosh, where's my purse? Gosh, where's my wallet? I can't find my wallet. And you can say the same thing, and you have to figure out, okay, how am I gonna do this? Understanding short-term memory is very prevalent among many forms of dementia. Unfortunately, it's just something you're probably not going to be able to solve. You can promote good brain health through exercise and mental engagement. And so, although you can't cure people of dementia, you can do things to try and slow progression. And that, exercise and keeping mental sharp, the thing that if you don't use it, you lose it, is really true. I've worked with people encouraging keeping a calendar of events to help remember important dates. So if somebody is maybe at an earlier stage, being able to refer to calendars can be helpful. I worked with a woman once who always felt that she was bored and she never participated in anything anymore. And she used to be so vibrant, but she wasn't remembering. Her short-term memory was so poor that every day she went to every group that was offered. And so what we did is we decided that we were going to take a picture, a little Polaroid of everything, every event that she went to, and she could put it in her photo album. So at the end of the day, it would cue her to remember, oh gosh, I must have done this today. And sometimes it was helpful and sometimes it wasn't, but it was just something that we tried to really help bring comfort to somebody and help them kind of keep their personhood intact. Avoid responding with frustration to promote dignity of the individual, and this can be really hard. This is why, as a caregiver, we'll talk about, it's really important to have somebody that you can tag out with, because you need to have somebody to be able to call and talk about your frustration, and that's really healthy for your mental well-being as a caregiver as well. Help build and promote familiar routines for the person to follow. Working in residential care was always really challenging because there's a certain flow to what the staff can do for people. But when you think about your own routine, let's say, I mean, I've done this, I'm a pretty creature of habit. My morning is pretty much the same. I do everything in a really similar way. So if all of a sudden that was changed on me, that would throw me off in just normal cognition, but somebody with altered cognition, try and find out and understand what they're used to and try and keep it as similar to that as possible. Because there is a thing called procedural memory and muscle memory that you can utilize and draw on to be able to help people continue to do what they did. There's a really great documentary called I'll Be Me, and it's about Glenn Campbell. I'm not sure if anybody has heard of Glenn Campbell, but his family did this for him when they took him on his last tour. He was able, and he had, moderate to significant Alzheimer's disease at that time. And they use all types of different routines and prompts for him to follow so that he could go on that one last tour. This is a big one. So there's a thing called therapeutic fibbing. And this can be used when memory loss is more advanced and an individual may forget loved ones are deceased and maybe begin to search or and ask for them repetitively. And a lot of people feel very skeptical because they don't want to lie to somebody they love or they don't want to feel like they're being dishonest or untruthful. But therapeutic fibbing really helps kind of join where that person is and join their journey. So, an example of therapeutic fibbing that I have used before is I worked with a woman who always picked up her kids at 3 p.m. And at 3 p.m., she wanted to leave. And, our team wanted to be truthful. And they're like, well, you actually live in a nursing home and your kids are grown. And, so you don't have to go pick them up because you're older now. And that would just set her off because where she was in her journey is she was not an older woman living in a nursing home with grown children. She was a mother whose children were waiting for her at elementary school and they needed her. And I can speak that as a mother, if that's where I was and somebody tried to convince me otherwise, I would, I would be pretty assertive that I was going to get my kids. And so what we did at that point was we found out from her children what her husband did. And her husband worked, I think it was GM perhaps. And so we would say to her, Bob, GM let out early today. So Bob picked up the kids. They're going to meet us here a little bit later. Why don't we go do such and such? And it wasn't truthful, but it allowed her to be able to still have autonomy and dignity while also recognizing something from her life that she could actually feel good about, as opposed to having to face something that she probably wasn't going to believe and it caused a lot of distress. So another symptom, changes in emotional state and or personality changes. Try to understand what has caused a change in emotional state. Did something happen? Validate what the person is feeling is real, even if it's not based in reality. Um, Feeling heard and being understood is so important to people. An example of where I've had to do this before was I was working with somebody who had Lewy body dementia. And I mentioned that there were some hallucinations that went along with that. And I walked into the room and the person was very afraid for me because there were ants on the floor and I needed to get the ants out of this person's room. Now I could have spent some time and, shared that there were no ants in the room and tried to calm her down, but she saw the ants and that's what a hallucination is. So we got a little creative and I went to the housekeeper and I got a broom and I swept them out and I said, gosh, that must have been scary, but you know what? They're all gone. And even if she saw some, I still validated what she was feeling. Promote engagement in positive activities of interest. So being able to take your mind off of something and focusing on something positive. Isn't that what we all do when we're kind of in a bad mood and we have a change in emotional state? I know when I'm not feeling really great, I do something that I like to do, maybe read a book or go for a walk. Um, it's the same for people who are living with dementia. Avoid challenging the person's reality. Again, joining the journey is something we can do. Except people can change with the disease process. I've heard so many times, oh my gosh, mom was never like that. Mom never would have swore. And then mom is swearing like a sailor. That has happened quite a bit to me. And just talking through that, it's the nature of not just the disease process, but people change with life too. And so just being able to provide caregivers and other family members space with that change. And provide simple reassurances with empathy goes a long way. And that's true for everybody when somebody's having a tough time. And just allowing space to express those feelings. Another symptom that I've dealt a lot with is fluctuations in hygiene or having physical challenge. And a lot of time this happens at the more moderate and late stage when it's really difficult to get somebody to maybe bathe or brush their teeth or wash their hands. And that's, especially when incontinence happens, being able to help somebody, just be dignity and have, good, clean bodies. If you notice a person needs hygienic support, just ask discreetly if they might need assistance. Because sometimes there might be an awareness on that part. And instead of just saying, come on, your brief is wet, let's go change it. Again, dignified existence, being able to say, oh my gosh, I noticed there's something on your pants. I'd love to help you if you don't mind. I have a little bit of time right now. Would that be okay with you? Provide space for the person to be as involved as possible in their own personal care. Even people at the very late stages of dementia can participate in care of their own. Inquire to and make sure they have their preferred care items available. If you're caring for me and you give me a generic face lotion, I probably won't be as apt to moisturize my skin. But if you give me a really nice brand, maybe Oil of Olay, I'm probably going to um, put moisturizer on my face because not only do I recognize it, but also you may be using those sensory cues where I can smell that oil of Olay and the muscle memory and my sensory memory kicks in and it's going to remind me that that is what maybe I need to do. Engage in positive hygienic practices together. Oh my gosh, my hands are so filthy. I got this new hand soap. It smells so good. Will you try it out with me? Identify support system of the person for in-depth assistance if needed. Sometimes being able to do that physical hygienic care just isn't within your scope or your reach as a caregiver. And this is really true for a lot of, we talked about 2/3 of the caregivers being women, but a lot of sons that are caregivers don't necessarily feel comfortable maybe giving mom the type of, personal care that she might need, or maybe a lot of our older women from the generation of the, 30s, 40s, and 50s, you know, they're not going to be amenable to male caregivers. And identify safety hazards in shared spaces. So, how can caregivers be prepared? Assessing where the caregiver is. What's your knowledge and your commitment? So, knowing what supports you need. Identify your support system. Again, who in your world can help you. And if you don't have somebody in your world that can help you, reach out to a physician, or alzheimers.org could give you resources. Have your important documents available. So if you are the power of attorney for somebody, or somebody has an advance directive, make sure you know where to access them and that they're stored and easily accessible in the time of an emergency so that you don't have to be scrambling for them if you need quick access to them. A quick list of go-tos. So, we talked about a lot of different strategies for different symptoms of dementia. Maybe take some time and write a quick list of something that the person you're caring for likes or responds well to, so that if you're in a time of stress, you maybe don't have to think about it. You could just say, oh, I'm going to try this. And also give yourself grace, because what works one day might not work the next. Awareness of self-care. Caregivers need to take care of themselves. A lot of caregivers I've worked with felt selfish or guilty, but it is imperative for you to care for yourself in order to be a good caregiver. And what's your inspiration and motivation for caring? It's so important to be able to recognize what keeps you going every day. At some point, a lot of people choose to not take curative measures because there is no cure for Alzheimer's disease or related dementias. There can be things that help people have a higher quality of life. Sometimes people can, do physical therapy or different types of maybe medication or treatment, depending on what other disease processes you might have alongside of your dementia. But sometimes there does come a time where people are starting to decline to a point where there's not really a turn back point. And that's a lot of times where people wonder if hospice can help. And so the hospice philosophy focuses on symptom management and quality of life, which in the care of dementia aside from, if there's other clinical diagnoses that you're dealing with, are really philosophically tied with hospice, because that's what hospice does, is they focus on managing symptoms, not necessarily curing them. Dementia is degenerative, which means it gets worse over time. And so having hospice to be able to support that process through their nurses, their spiritual care, their volunteers, their social work, it can be really helpful to have that support. If an individual experiences a consistent decline and your goal is focusing on comfort, then hospice really might be appropriate for you. Because hospice provides symptom management, emotional support, education, spiritual support, and bereavement counseling. So really not just caring for the individual, but the whole family, and the whole circle of caregivers. And if eligibility criteria is met, hospice is a Medicare covered benefit. So I always tell people, check with your local hospice provider for questions you might have if you want to know if someone you are a caregiver for could be eligible. I'm going to go on record to say that I feel Angela Hospice is an excellent hospice provider, but more than anything, it doesn't matter what provider you go with as long as you get what you need as a caregiver. And that really is what Angela Hospice's mission is that we give you the education and the support, even if you don't need us. We just want to make sure that you get what you need in this world. It's so important as caregivers that you have access to people who can help you through this process. So that leaves us with about 8 minutes. I can answer questions, or Jen, if there are things in the chat, I'm more than happy to have some dialogue with everybody.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Jamie. And yes, there are a couple things in the chat that I want to share. And remind everyone that in order to have Jamie answer any questions, you can do this a couple ways. One is you can unmute yourself and ask Jamie directly the question, or you can put it in a chat, and you can also make it directly to me if you don't feel comfortable putting it in the public chat, just so I can see it, and I will relay the question to Jamie without revealing your identity, just to maintain your privacy and comfort level. As well as just ensure that you know that this we are still recording. So I want to make sure that's public to everyone, but the chats are not public on the recording. So Jamie, a couple of the questions that came up, I will answer one of them real quick. And someone asked if this is recorded. And yes, as I just shared, we are recording this session. It will be available on our website, which is askforangela.com. That will be available in the next couple of days. We do a couple of cleanups and then put that up, as well as all previous episodes of Angela Cares is also available on our website for your viewing as well. So please take a look at that and be on the lookout in the next couple of days for that to get posted. The other question was, does Angela Hospice come out to the home once a week?
So what happens when somebody elects to go onto a hospice service? And this is pretty much standard for hospices across the board. I'll speak to Angela Hospice's practices. But when somebody signs on for hospice, we do a full comprehensive assessment. And that is from our nursing department, our social work department, and our spiritual care department. We talk about what your goals of care are, what your needs are, and from there we determine a plan of care that really meets your needs and goals. For some people, that means going every other week. For some people, that means they might need a visit a couple days a week. So it's really determined on that collaborative first couple of visits. I would say traditionally, a lot of our patients and families do have a weekly visit. We do try to make sure that we don't have more than 7 days without an RN visit, just because we like to keep tabs and support our families. Sometimes that isn't met because of preference, or sometimes appointments change. You're scheduled on a Monday, but then a Monday doesn't work, so we change to a Tuesday. So it's just really dependent. I would say on average, though, once a week is pretty much a norm.
Excellent. Thank you for that question, and thanks for Jamie, your answer. A couple other questions that have come in. This person asked to remain anonymous. They said that they understand that you're not a doctor and that you can't diagnose anyone or give any diagnosis via Zoom, but they're wondering if there are any early signs that they should be watching for in their loved one that has a history, a family history, excuse me, of dementia and Alzheimer's, and should they be aware and watching out for as they care for their loved ones in their older age?
Mhm. Yeah, that's actually a really great question. In my experience of working with people who have not yet been diagnosed, it's not really a formal diagnosis, but it's called mild cognitive impairment, and it's not quite a disease process yet, that requires an actual diagnosis. But some hallmarks of that disease, or some ways or not disease, but um, diagnosis can be, repeating yourself quite a bit. Um, Maybe not remembering appointments, getting details confused, not being able to maybe manage a checkbook. Sometimes if people are, let's say, living alone, sometimes they might look a little more disheveled, and so paying attention to hygiene, are their hands dirty? Does their hair maybe look like they're not washed? Are they maybe losing weight and there's not a reason for it? Now, that doesn't necessarily indicate that it's a dementia. It could just be, somebody's having a challenge with maybe getting in and out of a bathtub, or maybe just things change as you get older. But those are things that might be little red flags to say, I might want to do a little bit more digging. So, not a formal diagnosis, but again, and some people who develop mild cognitive impairment don't ever go on to get diagnoses of dementia or other disease processes that cause the signs and symptoms of dementia. But those are, in my experience, have been the things that people have reported the most. Withdraw, sleeping a lot.
Excellent. Thank you. Again, if you'd like to ask Jamie a direct question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Jamie. There is one more question, but just before we do, I want to point out in the chat, one of our value team members has put the actual link for all our Angela Cares videos. Again, you can find that on our website, but the link is in the chat. And remind you of a couple upcoming events that we have going on within the organization. This Saturday opens our Tree of Life event here on the grounds at Angela Hospice. Come up and see this gorgeous campus that we have here in Livonia, as well as possibly put an angel on the tree and see the grounds lit up. So come at night if you can, and maybe Mother Nature may contribute a little later in the season with some snow for us. Come up and see that facility starting on the Saturday, the 16th at 10 a.m. is our opening ceremony. We have some workshops coming up for children, children's holiday workshop that's put on by our phenomenal grief care team here at Angela Hospice. There's information on our website about signing up for this event, and that's Saturday, December 7th. So that's just around the corner, believe it or not. And then, of course, we have two other that are coming up for getting through the holidays workshop. And this now is an in-person, and this will be next week on Tuesday, November 19th. This is information, again, you can find on our website. But I wanted to point out one other question. It looks like a couple other questions have come in, Jamie, while I was talking. One
Yeah.
of them.
Could I also just really quick
Sure.
also add, and I think Catherine, it might be in the link Catherine put in the chat, but on our website, we also have a publication that we've published that's a caregiver's journal that also has a lot of this information in it, as well as when I talked about building your toolkit, there's a little guide in there to be able to help you put all that information together.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so the one question that we have, Jamie, was Are all people with dementia classified as non-decisional, or when should that patient or family member become or be defined as non-decisional? And I would ask Jamie, maybe you could explain what is non-decisional and what is decisional.
Mhm. So that is actually a really great question, and it's very highly debated. So when people talk about somebody being decisional, it means being able to really make their own decisions. And we make so many decisions on a daily basis. There's a whole range from, what do I want to eat for breakfast to, where do I need to live to be the safest? A lot of times when people put something known as a durable power of attorney in place, in order for it to be activated, somebody has to be determined to be deemed incompetent or non-decisional, which means that they're not able to make any of those decisions on their behalf. I always find that's a really challenging way to put it because even for somebody who's very advanced in their dementia process, still might be able to make a certain level of have a certain level of decision making that belongs to their autonomy. And so generally, it's not just having the diagnosis. In order for somebody to really be determined to be non-decisional, what is the standard is that it's generally two physicians will review your case or your capacity to make decisions and kind of certify whether or not that power of attorney should be enacted. It's also one thing that you do want to pay attention to, though, is because some people don't have power of attorneys put in place at the point when physicians are like, you really don't have that decision-making capacity anymore. And at that point, putting a power of attorney in place is very difficult because they've already been determined to not be able to make decisions. And so that's why it's so important to have those early planning discussions to know who would you like to speak for you in the event that you can't. And also, what decisions would you like them to make for you? I've worked with people who have had very impaired decision making, and normally a decision like whether or not to have CPR wouldn't be in their ability to make decisions. But you can also take a look, what has somebody's life choices shared with you in order to help make those decisions. For instance, if somebody has said their whole life, I just want to take the natural approach. I don't ever want CPR. I really, want to just let nature take its course. And then let's say that they have a diagnosis of dementia and are very advanced, but they haven't officially put something in place to that effect about CPR. Well, then they can't make that decision anymore and they end up not having their wishes honored. And so that's where there's so many different complicated situations that can arise with this. Um, so healthcare surrogate versus DPOA. So there's a lot of names that they're called, and there's a lot of different verbiages for different documents. But what I generally recommend for people who are looking to have that is in the document itself, because there's not just one standard form, there are multiple different versions of forms. I would really recommend that you read through that and read what level of decision making can that person make for you. Can you make healthcare decisions? Can you make mental health care decisions? Can you make decisions regarding IV medications, intubation? So it's really in that verbiage of those forms. If you go to MLTCOP, I think it's .org, Michigan Long-Term Care. It's a resource that was set forth by Title IX of the Social Security Act. They have a really great healthcare power of attorney form that it has a whole education section on what the different types of power of attorneys are, how to put them together, and it has some really great standard forms for them. Trying to look it up so I can put the link in the here we go. if I can put the link in the chat, because this website has a lot of really great resources about this topic and decisions and making conversations. I teach a class at the U of M about policy, but also about dementia care, and we use this website quite a lot because of the richness of the information.
Excellent. I know that we've gone a little bit over on our time, Jamie, but we did have one more question that I'm hoping you can give us just a few minutes on. And just as I, excuse me, wrap this up, again, Jamie has put some links into the chat as well as, excuse me, as well as some of our team members have put in some links to the uh, caregiver's guide that Jamie mentioned, as well as some of the grief care workshops. These are links in our chat. Feel free to share them, join us. Let us know if we can help out in any way so we can help you get the help that you deserve and as well as your loved ones.
There was also one longer question
Yep.
about challenging from the south to the north, in terms of transferring hospice. If you ever have any questions about that, our Patient Access Center would talk you through a process like that. And a lot of times we take care of the paperwork for people on their behalf at that point. So it's not something you'd have to do alone if that was an interest.
Very good. And I did address that one directly to the
Oh,
responder. But Jamie
good.
brings up a very, very good point. If you have any questions and about insurance or process or referral or getting information, we have a fabulous team in our Patient Access Center that you can call at any time to get the information, inquiries, just to find out if it's something that you or your loved one can access and what can be done. And you can call that number at 734-464-7810. Again, you can go on our website and that number you can find it sort of right on the front page of our website, but also feel free to keep that as a reference moving forward for our Patient Access Center. Again, that is 734-464-7810. And our last question, just because I know, and this is a great topic and wonderful conversations, I just wanted to make sure we had one last question for you, Jamie, is what suggestions can you offer when your loved one refuses services to help them? My mom had services set up for physical therapy and nursing. When they came, she tells them, I don't need help. She has been dismissed twice already, and I'm trying to set up services again. And how can we help her realize what she needs while pretty much maintaining her dignity?
So you are in the same boat as almost every many children that I've worked with, and you are in a really tough spot. So I'm just validating completely your experience because it is very challenging when that person still has the autonomy and desire to not want to participate. And it could be a couple different reasons. Maybe they truly don't understand and have an awareness of what assistance could be. There could be, especially if they're in their own home, not wanting people to be in their house. There's the whole, well, I don't need help. I've been an adult my whole life. You're my child. I'm your mother. I know what needs to be done. And so a lot of times it's just, constant conversation and trying to figure out different ways. There's no one thing that works because every person has their own rationale and disease process. But I would say that what I've given advice to is there anybody that your mom would trust they're taking their word for? Is there a physician? Is there a clergy member? A close friend? Something that this person that your mom really likes to do that would be impacted by not participating in these services. That you can talk through to try and get this person to agree or your mom to agree.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Above all, thank you, Jamie, for sharing your wisdom with us. your knowledge, and your care and compassion. I know I work with Jamie on a daily basis, so I get to see this every time I interact with her, whether it's with a team member here at Angela Hospice or a patient or a family member. But it's so great to see and be able to have Jamie share this with everyone outside, the people that are watching this live today, as well as the recording in the future. So thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. We look forward to 2025 and some upcoming opportunities and presentations and knowledge and education, not only for the general public, but also for the people we care for and people that we want to make sure that are living their lives and with dignity and care. So on that note, I will thank you all for joining us. This will be recorded or was recorded and will be put up on our website in the next couple of days for you to share with your loved ones or even rewatch again. In the meantime, feel free to use the resources that we were able to share with you, and those can be located on our website. And at that note, Jamie, thank you again for joining
Thank
us.
you.
And
Thank
thank
you
you
all,
all.
and good luck in your caregiving journeys. You're all phenomenal people.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Have a great day.